The White Pyramid in Dahshur. What do we know about this mysterious structure? This is the least researched pyramid in Egypt. Our team had an opportunity to visit and research this ancient complex in the sands of Sahara. What was found in the White Pyramid? How does this pyramid look inside? Did it contain sarcophagus and a mummy? In this video, I'm sharing our experience of exploration of the White Pyramid. It is the second part of my story about the Amenemhat. II project made great report, and Keith Hamilton wrote great article about the White Pyramid. So, let's start. Sunk in the west floor of the chamber, we have the sarcophagus, which is made of several slabs of sandstone and surrounded by Tura limestone. The southwest magazine is shown on the south wall, and on the north wall, we have the niche. Just visible on the east wall is the opening for the eastern magazine. In this drawing, he has drawn the niche too low on the north wall and placed a huge stone on top, when in reality, the top of the niche is aligned with the top of the magazines. In his sketch of the Southwest magazine, we see that it extends to a depth of 184. This is closely matched to the other magazines. The height of the magazine at 150 matches that of the West. East he gives as 147, and Southeast as 148. Likewise, the widths of the magazines all closely match, being between 104 and 105. Though Morgan states that they are all placed symmetrically, we will see that he has placed the Southwest magazine in the wrong position along the south wall. The course above the magazine he gives as 68, giving a wall height in this location of 218. There appears to be some confusion in the layout of the ceiling. He reports that the ceiling slabs are 90 thick and are supported by 1 m on the north and south walls, and at the spread of the large pent beams above the ceiling is 4.25 meter. If we look at picture, we see that he has drawn the ceiling beam on the south wall being supported by 1 meter of wall, and the north end is clearly not supported by 1 meter of wall. He appears to have taken the width of the ceiling as 2.93 meter, added the 1 meter support of the south wall, and subtracted them from the 4.25 meter spread to give a support of 32 centimeter only on the north wall. His drawing then places the axis of the pent chamber south of the main chamber axis. Given the span of the chamber and size of these beams, one would expect more support than 32 centimeter. Again, more scrutiny of this area is required to clarify this confusion. By the way, some mysterious people say that if you click the like and subscribe button under the video, you will somehow miraculously find yourself in Egypt. But I didn't tell you that. In the above image, I have modified Morgan's picture in Photoshop to provide another possible solution. We now turn our attention to the niche, which Morgan describes as a small hiding place had been formed in the northwest wall. Thanks to his field sketch, we can see that the niche is 37 deep and 145 wide. And taking the chamber wall joint lines into account from the available images, it appears to be 75 high. This niche had been covered by a plate of stone some 10 centimeter thick, and part of this plate still survives. To robbers who did not know the layout of the chamber, this plate of stone would simply appear as a wall-course stone. But tomb robbers are a smart foe, and whatever was behind this plate has been long robbed. In this 2011 image, we see the debris spill into the niche. We can also make out some of the surviving cover plates still in place. Note the masonry joint lines that show that the top of the niche aligns with the top of the magazine. The West magazine is the only magazine that appears to have retained most of its closure stone. Here a small breach has been made in its top left corner. Morgan's sketch shows this stone to be some 35 thick, reducing the available storage space to a depth of 1.47 meter. This view is inside the niche, looking to the west, with a cover plate left. The back of the plate appears to have been left quite rough compared to the rest of the niche. And inside the niche, we see numerous dressing marks left by the masons. As to the function of the niche, the only thing I can think of is that it may have held a slab stela. Given the care in concealing the sarcophagus in the floor, why not do the same for a slab stela, whose positioning in the chamber effectively makes it a headstone for the sarcophagus? In this view, taken in December 2012, we can see that someone has obviously shifted a lot of debris to access the sarcophagus immediately below the niche. An excavation has been made in the back of the niche. The chamber floor line coincides with the top of the damaged wall, seen at bottom. A lot of white limestone can be seen piled up on right. How Morgan left this chamber is not clear. One might assume he cleared it of debris. But if this was the case, where has all this new debris come from? Indeed, if we look at the earlier image of 2011, we can see sizable pieces of masonry on top of the debris. The obvious concern is that all this debris might be more recent. Anyone unscrupulous enough to punch a hole through the ceiling will have no qualms about digging elsewhere. The most visible damage to the chamber is sadly the southwest magazine. In this location, we see extensive excavation has been done through the upper wall course and into the ceiling beam. You can just make out the clean vertical edges of the magazine entrance, and then the rough cutting above as they cut through the upper wall course, which formed part of the ceiling of the magazine. In this different view, taken from inside the sarcophagus, we see the badly damaged southwest magazine. Damage is also visible on the wall to the right of the magazine. There is much evidence of damage throughout the chamber. Which is recent and which is ancient, is a question that a thorough excavation can probably only answer. In this view, I have highlighted the damaged lintel stone above the magazine entrance. Note also the square hole in the south wall. This can be seen on the image. According to Morgan, all these magazines were separated from the main chamber by a thin wall of limestone. Remains of these walls may yet remain in place under the debris pile. Clearance in the area of the sarcophagus allows us a good look at the covering stone for the west magazine. Ooking up into the northwest corner, from inside the sarcophagus, it appears that the west magazine has been closed with 2 plates of stone that match the wall courses. Likewise, the covering plate for the niche blends in with the chamber wall courses. However, robbers would soon be suspicious of 2 equal blocks on top of each other. The entrance would be better concealed if the top block had been made a different width. That said, the joints are quite close, and a fine piece of the mason's skill in fitting them in the tight confines of this corner. From Morgan's sketch, the plate of stone is 35 centimeter thick, with the lower 2 chamber courses being 75 centimeter high and the entrance being 105 centimeter wide. Then one of these stones would be 0.28 of a cubic meter. Solid limestone at about 2,700 kilogram a cubic meter means that they weigh about 740 kilogram each. This is no small weight to put in place. Further, no rebate appears to have been left in the walls of the magazines to insert the block against. Looking through the breach in the upper closure stone, we can see into the west magazine. The thickness of the closure stone reduces the depth of the magazine to 1.47 meter. Morgan would report that the robbers had done a thorough job, and that no object remained in the tomb other than a piece of diorite statue, which bore the inscription below. In this view, looking down into the sarcophagus, from inside the southwest magazine, I have placed red lines to denote the chamber's floor level. Though called the sarcophagus, it is not like the solid, fine sarcophagus boxes that we come to expect in ancient Egypt, but could be more accurately described as a stone-lined pit. The linings of this pit are made of sandstone, and they create a void 236 long by 89 wide and 109 high. This void was covered with sandstone slabs some 30 thick, and on top of these, chamber flooring some 37 thick were placed to help conceal the location of the pit. We appear, therefore, to have a chamber where great effort was put into concealing all the magazines, the niche, and the pit. One can imagine robbers on first breaching into this chamber being met by a plain rectangular room. Inside the sandstone pit looking north, floor level would be some 67 centimeter above the top surface of the pit. Some undercutting of the north wall appears to have been made, and some faint mason marks can still be seen. This appears to have been done to allow engagement of the sandstone covering slabs. In this close-up view, we can see some of the mason's marks on the undercut. Note also what appear to be streaks of red mortar present on the sandstone. On the Anoter Morgan's sketches of the chamber, which again highlight some errors on his published drawings. When I first saw the Isita project images, it seemed that the Southwest magazine's location did not agree with his published drawings. Indeed, it seemed a strange place to position a magazine where the pit would obstruct access. In the above sketch, he provides a distance of 143 for the magazine from the west wall of the chamber, compared to the 105 given for the southeast magazine. This makes logical sense to displace the southwest magazine further east to help with access. The images I have definitely suggest that Morgan's measure of 143 is more likely to be correct, and so I have amended his pictures above to show the effect. That the amended figures are more likely correct can be deduced from the measures ISITA provide for the top course along the south wall. These measures of the top course are shown on the image, and I have placed Morgan's dimensions for the magazines on the same drawing. In the drawing, we can see that the magazines are surmounted by large lintel blocks of similar size. Logic might suggest that the center of these blocks should correspond with the center axis of the magazines. In the case of Southeast magazine, its axis from the east wall is 157. The center of its lintel is half of 241 plus 37, which amounts to 157.5. A similar exercise on the axis of the Southwest magazine shows it to be 195 from the west wall, and the center of the lintel to be half of 238 plus 76, which provides 195. This then provides another clue that Morgan's published scale drawings are incorrect. More confusion comes from his sketch on page 49, and that is in the measures that should highlight the length of the chamber. ISITA shows that the chamber length amounts to 732, which is in close agreement with his figure 80. However, his sketch suggests 833. Another method from his sketches could be 772, which is too long. Such confusion generally runs throughout his sketches, making it difficult to get a true picture of the chamber. From the available information, the above plan is my best guess of the chamber. Here I have the passage axis. Divide the chamber into two equal parts. In this scheme, the Southeast magazine would be 96 from the trench, which agrees closely with the 97 on his sketch. However, the Southwest magazine would only be 58 from the trench, which does not agree with his sketch. The next issue to address is the following statement by Morgan. The corridor measures inside 1.2, 2 meter wide by 1.3, 3 meter high. It provides the necessary space for the passage of the wooden coffin which contained the mummy. The internal height of the sarcophagus is 1.09 meter, and if the corridor was 1.33 meter, it is clear that a box 109 would have clearance. But as we now know that the height of the horizontal passage is only 102, we have an issue to address as to what can pass the junction of the descending and horizontal passage. With the vertical portcullis flush with the horizontal passage ceiling, a box of length 235 and 89 high could just squeeze past the junction. Any lid would have to be introduced separately. The internal space created by the sandstone sarcophagus is considerable. At 236 long, 89 wide, and 109 deep. Khufu's, by comparison, is 198 long, 68 wide, and 87 deep. What burial practice Amenemhat elected to use, such as a nested box configuration, we do not know, but given the large space available in the sandstone sarcophagus, it is possible that space could be found for canopic jars. A canopic chest could also be placed in one of the magazines, or even in the pit found in the lower passage, though this appears a bit distant from the sarcophagus and a lot of work to create this location. In the image, courtesy of Dieter Arnold, and based on Morgan's published drawings, we see a second coffin placed in the lower passage. Unfortunately, I have been unable to obtain a copy of Arnold's article, so I can only comment on the image above. It certainly makes logical sense that a second wooden coffin, or even a stone sarcophagus, could be placed in this area. The level floor in this area is certainly capable of holding another sarcophagus, as it is some 3.17 meter long and over 1.22 meter wide. Could we perhaps even be looking at a double burial? The strange tombs found to the west of the pyramid also contained double burials. The sizable pit in the floor could have held a canopic chest, or it may have contained valuable items, with the canopic in the coffin, or even in the mysterious niche that Morgan draws in his sketch. In the image, Arnold has drawn a stone that would rest on the diorite supports. I assume in this scenario that the large coffin had been brought in while the trench was open, and that the trench was subsequently closed, with access being thereafter restricted via the passage floor. A wooden coffin would be beneficial in this scenario, as its light weight compared to a stone sarcophagus would allow it to be moved to access the pit or the niche on the east wall if it exists. Another option is that a stone sarcophagus was fitted in this space. The smooth ramp is beneficial for such a heavy item. In a scenario like this, one can see all access being via the trench. If a burial, the stone sarcophagus could be transported down the descending passage, minus its lid, to the trench in the chamber floor. Prior to this, items would be placed in the pit and niche. The niche and pit would be covered, and the sarcophagus brought down the ramp and placed on the level floor, providing additional security to the pit and niche, as the sarcophagus would prevent access to these locations. After this operation had been completed, the trench would be filled with masonry, and its existence would be disguised by the chamber floor. It might seem strange and time-consuming to bring in all this masonry at the time of burial, and yet, we see sizable amounts of introduced masonry brought into the Hawara Pyramid, and even at Mazguna South. The so-called false passages which led to the sandboxes were filled with masonry. So the closing of a pyramid may not have been a quick affair. No doubt the people doing all this clever concealing might have divulged this information to robbers or took part in the violation of the tomb themselves. The above scenarios are just examples. But whatever the function of this area, the design of the lower passage would appear to be in the original plan of the tomb and not some later modification, though this could only be confirmed by detailed excavation. In this view looking east, we can see the ceiling breach in the southeast corner. Looking at the undamaged areas shows the quality of construction to be quite fine with very tight joints. It would have been a very impressive sight when new. Some cracks are visible in the walls and on the ceiling. But given its age and the violations inflicted on it, the structure is generally in good condition. In this earlier view of the Southeast magazine, we can see that the magazine is still largely filled with debris compared to the image on the previous page. Note also the ceiling breach. Close-up view of the ceiling breach. The roof covering the chamber is a somewhat unique design, as can be seen on Morgan's figures 82 and 83. 6 pairs of large pent beams span the chamber below, with each pair separated by a small space, which Morgan states was filled with small stones, sealed with plaster. The small gaps between the pent beams are the only access route into the chamber, and one needs to be slim enough to squeeze through a gap of 28 centimeter. A view inside one of the stone-filled gaps. The gable end of the pent beams was closed with horizontally placed blocks. The whole construction is quite utilitarian. Looking out through one of the gaps, at a distance of 1.30 meter above the thick ceiling slabs, we come across the roof floor, which is supported by partition walls. The image shows the breach in the roof floor, and through this we can see the sunlight coming through the gap between the pent beams. How accurate Morgan's drawings are of this roof, I am unable to say from the available images. In this view, we are looking down through the roof floor breach, and below we can see the breach that was made in the chamber ceiling stone. This concludes the guide to the pyramid substructure. For the remainder of the pyramid complex, I will only give brief points, as we have no modern images of the rest of the complex to help us, and Morgan's own publication is very sparse in detail. Those readers interested in the jewelry found in one of the Western tombs can easily find Morgan's work online. The complex is enclosed by a 225-meter-long rectangular enclosure wall. No detail is given on the construction of this wall. On the causeway leading to the enclosure, Morgan only states that it was a long paved avenue which was enclosed with brick walls. At the entrance to the enclosure, Morgan states, "To the right and to the left of the enclosure door, at the point where the avenue ends, were once 2 monuments, of which only the formless blocks of masonry are left today. The stones are connected to each other by means of hardwood dovetails very well preserved. What these structures are is not known, but it has been suggested that they might be similar to pylon-like structures found at the pyramid of Djedkare Sesi of the 5th dynasty. Morgan thought that whatever these constructions were, they must have been quite ornate, as many pieces of painted sculpture was found in their rubble. Beyond this rubble, a wide space exists before the pyramid. Here he reports that the disorder was much greater than the entrance constructions. Here he believed was the location of the funerary temple. In this area he found granite door thresholds, parts of limestone columns, friezes, steles, and inscriptions of all kinds, many of which bore the cartouche of Amenemhat II. North of the pyramid, outside of the enclosure wall, he came across more unknown construction which had been raised above mastabas of the 4th dynasty. Here more column fragments were found, and in the middle of this square building he found a curious stone table with sockets for a door, amongst a massive block of bricks. Left, we have the stone table. Morgan thought that the appendage had been destined for the flow of liquids. As previously mentioned, the whole site is poorly explored and documented. In the case of the causeway and area of the enclosure entrance, some near-surface magnetic investigation has been carried out. The authors state, "We have successfully detected 4 main structures in the area east of the pyramid. The causeway that connected the mortuary temple with the valley temple during the Middle Kingdom of the 12th dynasty, the mortuary temple and its associated rooms, ruins of an ancient working area, and an Egyptian-style tomb structure called a mastaba." The authors managed to trace some 300 meters of the causeway. The walls, probably of mud brick, were about 1.25 meters thick and distance between walls about 25 meters. At the western end of the enclosure, 3 tombs that contained double burials were discovered. 2 of these tombs had been robbed, but that of Princess Ida and Princess Amenemhat had been missed by the robbers. These long rectangular tombs are apparently quite similar and created in a trench in the ground. Morgan could find no trace of any superstructure above these tombs, so it may have been intended that these tombs were purposely meant to be concealed. The elongated tombs basically followed a north-south orientation. Entrance was on the north, and one would enter a long corridor at certain points along the west wall. Openings were left that provided access to the fine stone sarcophagi. These openings would be closed by a vertically lowered stone after burial. There are some issues with Morgan's text and drawings on these tombs that I find difficult to reconcile, so I will not dwell long on them. The sarcophagi were placed below the floor level of the corridor, and spaces were left that allowed the deceased access to the offering chamber, which was located under the corridor floor. Morgan's section shows the offering chamber under the corridor pavement. Spaces were left to connect the offering chamber to the space that held the sarcophagus. The design of the tomb led Morgan to conclude that the sarcophagus must have been put in place at the same time as the tomb had been built. This would prevent access to the offering chamber via the spaces between the two. Access to the offering chamber was through a hole in the corridor floor, which was closed with a slab. The whole corridor after burial was filled with well-fitting blocks of stone, while above the sarcophagus, the cavity was filled with blocks of stone that had all been marked as to their location. These had in turn been closed off by the large slab D, whose positioning was assisted by grooves found on the top of block E. Morgan did not remove the corridor blocking but accessed the sarcophagus by removing the stones above it, where he found the top of the sarcophagus protected by 11-centimeter thick wooden planks. The sarcophagus he describes as a well-polished hard sandstone, and inside was a fine wooden coffin. Here we have the plan of Princess Ida's tomb, with 3 spaces being left between the sarcophagus and offering chamber. The canopic chest is bottom left. Who these individuals were and their relationship to Amenemhat II is not clear-cut. Lisa Sabahi has done an interesting article on the female family of Amenemhat II for those interested in looking further into this subject. In the items that Morgan found in the tomb, hieroglyphic inscriptions whose animal signs had been truncated, legs removed, were found. This incomplete form of hieroglyphics was the subject of a study by Gianluca Miniacci, and it would appear that the system was introduced in the latter part of the reign of Amenemhat III, as it is rarely seen at his Dahshur pyramid complex. The offering table of Neferupta found in the burial chamber of the Hawara pyramid is a good example of this new system. Chronology is often imprecise, but using Clayton's dates from his book, we have Amenemhat II at 1,929 to 1895 and Amenemhat III at 1,842 to 1,797. This suggests that Amenemhat III came to the throne some 53 years after the death of Amenemhat II, and as it is thought that he moved to Hawara in about the 15th year of his reign, this would give a period of at least 68 years, if we assume that the incomplete system of hieroglyphics was developed at Hawara. If the people buried in the western tombs were known to Amenemhat II, they must have died at a good old age. It would be interesting to examine the remains of Ita above to determine